I think it's time I made a Garuda guide. Garuda, in my opinion, is quite underrated, especially when you take into account how powerful she is and the amount of synergies she has. But you want to know what's the craziest thing about Garuda? Is how easy it is to absolutely obliterate and nuke an entire room in a click of a button. Garuda quite literally is one of the easiest frames to hit damage cap with minimal effort. So let's dive into the video. Why Garuda, you may ask? It's because of the Jade Shadows update. I'm sure many of you know that update by now, but to give you a quick summary, in the Jade Shadows update was when we got the armor and health changes, and essentially the Jade Shadows update kind of made Slash a bit weaker, well, actually significantly weaker than it was before. However, what it did do is actually make Garuda's first ability substantially stronger because of how much health enemies have now, and her first ability scales off the amount of health enemies have, so it's just insanely strong at the moment. Garuda's passive is called Death's Gate. The more Garuda kills, the more damage she does. Up to 100% additional damage for weapons and abilities with each kill or assisted kill. You get 5% damage per kill, and the bonus will decay at 1% per 2 seconds after a 5-second delay of no killing. You can see this damage bonus on the bottom right, it's pretty easy to see. Garuda is also one of the only Warframes that actually receive a special upgrade for leveling up. She gains a total of 125% energy capacity at rank 30, as opposed to the 50% all other Warframes get. Garuda's first ability is called Dread Mirror. This is a lot to unpack and pretty much revolves around her entire kit, and it is made up of Dread Mirror and Dread Heart, so keep these two names in mind. Leap into the air and pounce on an enemy target within 30 meters, staggering all the other enemies around you in 8 meters. If the enemy is below 40% health, the victim will be instantly killed. You will be invulnerable while doing this, but once you have pounced on the enemy, you will summon a Dread Mirror, this literal large floaty thing in front of you, for 20 seconds at base. This mirror will be invulnerable and will block all incoming ranged and melee attacks in a cone, essentially. And this mirror will also follow your reticle. The damage received will be absorbed into the Dread Heart, which is the bleeding heart above the Dread Mirror that spawns when you cast Dread Mirror. This heart will stay here indefinitely and will multiply all incoming damage by 2 times and absorb it. But when you've cast a Dread Mirror on an enemy, Dread Heart will steal 10% of the victim's max health and absorb it as initial damage for the heart. It's very good for focusing super high health targets, especially if you have a good idea of what enemies have higher health than others. Now you can actually throw Dread Heart by holding down your ability keybind, and this makes Garuda hold the heart and charge it up in her talons and drains 50 energy per second, which will continuously increase the total absorbed damage at the time of the cast by 100% per second. So if you store, let's say, 2 million damage and hold it down for 4 seconds, you will increase that 2 million damage by 400% when you throw it. Pretty insane, yes, especially since Steelpath enemies have a lot of health. When you let go of the ability or you simply run out of energy while charging it, you will throw the supercharged heart that will just explode and do millions of damage. You will deal impact damage with 100% guaranteed chance at a 10-meter radius at base. You are restricted with your movement while charging up the heart, but you can also just kind of hover in mid-air if you are casting it. This ability can literally hit damage cap with its scaling. Because it scales off of enemy health, the higher the health, the more damage you scale, the more damage you do. Now you can imagine how easy it is to hit damage cap when you start reaching level cap enemies, which is why Garuda is such a fantastic frame for all levels of content, because she's technically infinitely scaling, and that's what makes her so strong. You will also deal slightly more damage if you armor strip the enemies, but nowadays you just charge up the heart, but armor stripping will allow you to do the true damage that is shown at the top. Dread Heart will also count as ability and weapon damage, meaning Nourish will make it apply viral, and the Smeeter critical charm buff will make it orange crit, which is pretty cool. Dread Ward is the augment for Dread Mirror. This allows you to become unkillable when Dread Mirror kills an enemy on cast for 8 seconds. This will basically proc when the enemy is below 40% health and you get that instant kill. This invulnerability is affected by ability duration, and also the Dread Ward effect actually takes priority over quick thinking. Now the reason it's actually unkillable even though I still consider it to be invulnerability, it's because Garuda will actually still take damage. It's just her health will not reach 0. You'll literally go to 2 health and just stay there for the duration of the Dread Ward buff. It's very good for survivability. The duration is refreshable, but I don't think you need it if I'm being honest. If you do want it, you can. Her second ability is called Blood Altar. Leap and impale a target within 30 meters. Again, she basically has 2 leaps, which actually allows her to be very mobile if you're leaping towards enemies in a distance. The target will become invulnerable to incoming damage, but it will emit a healing aura for you and your allies. It restores 25% health per second while draining 1% of the maximum health from the victim. You can have up to 3 altars at a time. You can actually release the enemy by looking at him and holding down the ability again. Blood Altar is very good for Archon Intensify. It basically keeps the buff up permanently. And also it's a great way to kind of slowly kill those super tough targets that have a lot of health and you kind of just want to not deal with them. It's basically a great way to stop a very dangerous enemy if they can be affected by Blood Altar. Her third is called Bloodletting. Sacrifice 50% of your maximum health to cleanse status effects and restore 40% of your total maximum energy. You cannot self-kill with Bloodletting. You can only go as low as 2 health points, and then it will stop you from casting, saying that you need more health. But this effectively means that the higher your total energy, the better, since each 50% sacrifice of their health gives you 40% or more of your total energy, the more energy you get per cast. But this also means that having higher health gives you no benefit at all. So you do not need to health tank with Garuda. Paired with your second ability gives you infinite energy sustain, as you can heal yourself with Blood Altar and then cast Bloodletting for energy consistently. It's just a great way to instantly restore your energy without needing energy compared to other frames. Bloodforge is the augment which allows equipped weapons to be instantly reloaded when casting Bloodletting. It does take from the maximum ammo pool, so it's not like it makes it out of thin air, but works very well with slow reload weapons or weapons that have low ammo maximum like the Kuvazar and so on. Garuda's fourth is called Seeking Talons. This ability does tie into Dread Mirror a little bit, but you can either tap or hold to charge Seeking Talons. You will channel Seeking Talons to send out a whirlwind of flying talons. You will have a 2-meter radius that encircles Garuda at the maximum radius essentially when you've charged it to the max, and enemies hit by these talons will receive slash damage. The ring will be fully charged at about 95 degrees, meaning pretty much your full screen, and the range of the ability scales with how much it's charged, and it can go up to 60 meters at base. Seeking Talons will send out 8 of them, and if you tap the ability, it will automatically send out the talons when they are fully charged, but you can actually hold to decide when to cast. Enemies hit will be marked for 10 seconds, and attacking these enemies will give your weapons and abilities 75% to apply slash status effects that can be scaled with 100% ability strength. But this one is a little interesting. The slash bonus stacks as a separate instance, essentially. All sources of damage are capable of inflicting slash except for dot effects. For example, let's look at the Tazakor hitting an enemy. You see how many slash procs are being applied here. In short, it applies 2 instances and it will proc on every damage instance. I would suggest casting Seeking Talons when you are in the air, as the recovery animation is pretty long, but you can actually cancel it with a melee attack. The reason it ties in with your first is because when you mark the enemies, it will allow Dread Heart to proc slash, and the huge slash procs from the big amount of damage will absolutely be insane in terms of the scaling, and it will just insta-kill them if they even manage to survive Dread Heart in the first place. The augment is called Blending Talons, makes this ability much better. Instead of channeling, you can now tap it to perform a 9-meter AoE around Garuda. It kind of stops the channeling. You can still channel, but it stops it with the quick tap and it just feels a lot better. Your talons will gain 100% additional combo count chance when hitting enemies affected by bleed or slash, and this is affected by ability range. I do think this is a must-have augment for Garuda. It makes a huge difference in how she plays. Garuda does have talons that are actually exalted weapons, but you can only see the talons when you actually have no melee equipped. Now we will go over the talons later on when we talk about building her, but that pretty much covers the abilities. As always, if you could smash that like button, it helps me out. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. There are 2 main ways to play Garuda: the Dread Mirror nuking one and the Seeking Talons gun buffing spread. I've tried melee and many other ways, but honestly there is no other option that out nukes and out damages Dreadheart's damage. It is so good. How do we play Garuda? It's pretty simple, to be honest with you. You cast your 1 when you see an enemy. You want to keep up Dread Mirror as much as you can because that is your way of staying alive. You can then constantly recast your 1 so you can build up Dreadheart's damage, or you can just rely on enemies shooting at you and then it will just absorb the damage and just scale that. You want to cast Blood Altar on the nearest enemy if you're going to hang around a bit so that you pretty much have all the health regen that you need. As soon as you have a deadly status effect on you, like Toxin, Heat, or Gas and so on, or if your energy is low, cast Bloodletting, your third. Be sure to stay in Blood Altar's range so when you lose 50% of your health from your 3, you just regain it immediately. Keep casting your 4 every now and then to prime enemies with the mark and have that slash bonus, and just remember that the slash bonus is a separate instance for when damage is dealt to enemies, so you get double slash procs. The combo is pretty much 1, 4, 2, 3, constantly repeat 1 and 4. Fairly straightforward, pretty simple to play. The only thing I recommend is just keep your mirror up. That's all you need to remember. Now let's move on to how to build a no Helminth Garuda. Let's start with the newer players. A balanced build like this will suffice with Garuda. You will have infinite energy and health sustain, and your 1 will quite literally nuke everything. One thing I can recommend as a newer player is if you can get your hands on natural talent, swap it out for one of the mods because you really need casting speed on Garuda. She's much better with casting speed. Just keep adding mods as you get them and progress. Now let's move on to Steelpath. But before we move on to Steelpath building, we need to talk about the Molt Reconstruct situation. This arcane was quite literally made for Garuda, and that is because Molt Reconstruct will heal yourself and allies within affinity range for 6 health for each energy point spent on the initial casting cost of your abilities. Meaning, if your Seeking Talons cost you 100 energy, you gain 600 health by simply casting this ability once. Why is this so good? Considering Bloodletting cuts your health in half with this arcane, you can simply just cast your 1 and 4 and you're back up to full HP in an instant, especially with casting speed. Blood Altar is technically not needed at all, since the biggest problem is it forces you to sit still in some cases, and Molt Reconstruct removes that because you can subsume it with your Helminth ability, which is why Blood Altar is Garuda's main subsume slot. For a no Helminth Steelpath setup, you want to focus on a decent amount of range and strength. You don't need that much duration with Garuda compared to other frames, which is very nice. However, duration is pretty good if you want to keep the mark up longer and you're focusing on your 4th ability. If you're focusing on your 1st ability and so on and spamming your 1st, you don't need that much duration, you need more range. Because Bloodletting has status chance cleanse, I opted for adaptation for those enemies that kind of hit you in the back and you're not looking at them, or you can just drop adaptation for fast deflection, that works too. Or catalyzing shields for full shield gating. I must say, shield gating for Garuda is perfect because of the nature of her ability. Archon Intensify works very well with Blood Altar, so you get a nice constant 60% strength from Archon Intensify, which is why it's so good. That is the bonus of having Blood Altar. Because we don't need Molt Reconstruct since this is a no Helminth setup and we do already have Blood Altar to sort out our health, I actually opted for Arcane Arachne, which is a global damage buff when you Warlatch. But the thing about this arcane is the damage bonus is multiplicative with ability strength, and it affects Dreadheart and the explosion, making it do a ridiculous amount of damage. If you, let's say, have like 400k damage built up from your Dreadheart and you quick throw it without really holding it down, you'll pretty much do over 1.2 million damage with Arcane Arachne and the amount of strength you have. That is an estimate, don't take those values literally, I'm just giving an example how much it increases the damage for lower effort. And that is my no Helminth Steelpath build for her. In my previous top 5 underrated video, I actually initially put Equilibrium on Garuda because I didn't want to spam her 3 the whole time, but with more testing and playing after this video, I found that you do not need Equilibrium at all. That was my mistake. Let's talk about Archon Shards. You have 2 options, like seriously, go all in on casting speed. Like, I'm being dead serious. You can go all in, 5 casting speed shards. It would actually make Garuda feel amazing, especially of how her abilities move and how they work in terms of the casting speed. 2, go at least 2 casting speed shards, preferably Tower Forged, and then go for the remainder Archon Shards that you want for the build. Up to you, Honestly, the first option is a lot of fun. Let's talk about Garuda's Talons. I mentioned earlier that she has Talons, and I honestly say that they are there purely if you want to. They're not the greatest, not because the Talons are actually bad as in themselves. Like I said, you just can't out-damage or out-nuke your first ability. But if you do want to build for it, I would recommend Afflictions going either Viral or Flat Toxin. And I would also recommend Malicious Raptor because it's amazing for Afflictions at how it constantly procs that Arcane. They aren't bad melees with decent crit and status chance overall. You can go melee influence if you'd like, but I'm not going to show you because I'm not going to build for melee influence. One thing I would recommend though is melee duplicate with the Seeking Talons extra slash instance, meaning you would get a lot of slash instances with melee duplicate. Here is a budget build as well. I wanted to just add them just in case you wanted to use them or anything like that. Now let's talk about Helminth builds. Starting off with Raw Garuda. Here we subsume our second. We replace the health regen with Molt Reconstruct, and Raw will increase the damage of Dreadheart and will also technically increase the slash procs that you get from Seeking Talons from the ability itself and your weapons. Pretty straightforward setup, and it's pretty easy to build. I don't really need to explain it. It's just a nice all-rounder buffing setup for Garuda. Up next is the famous Gloom Garuda. The reason this works so well is because Gloom does exactly what Blood Altar does, but just better. It follows you around, it slows enemies while healing you, and you gain a huge amount of survivability and crowd control from Gloom alone. This allows us to drop Molt Reconstruct and take advantage of Arcane Arachne instead. This means barely any enemies can hit us and Dreadheart gets a huge damage increase. Pretty much the most solid, no effort, easy to play Garuda setup. Honestly, it's the perfect lazy setup to play with Garuda. I did try Wrathful Advance, I tried a bunch of other subsumes. Honestly, not worth it for Wrathful Advance. You can go for it if you want. But I will say Nourish is also a fantastic option because you apply Viral to enemies, but that in turn increases your damage from your 4th and 1st. So I would recommend running Nourish. Finally, let's move on to the craziest Garuda synergy outside of nuking with Dreadmir. The slash on death mechanic that Seeking Talons possesses. This mechanic was brought to my attention by this lovely specimen here, Keesie Oil Corner. I think I said your name correctly. Go and check out his channel. When an enemy is affected by her 4th and marked, it creates a separate instance of slash when the enemy is damaged. There is an interaction that allows the slash proc to spread to other enemies on death. Pair this with Zarta's Whisper and it creates a giant bubble of death that keeps spreading. Then we can make use of the Kuva Sobek with acid shells that will explode enemies, dealing damage to nearby enemies when they die. Pair this with Zarta's Whisper, and the explosion mechanic will allow you to spread those slash procs, and it just gets this huge chaining effect, which is very, very fun and very satisfying to see. Unlike Saren with her Toxic Lash and so on, and all the other synergies with her, but this does mean you can get some serious scaling and chaining effects, which is incredibly satisfying. There are a few other options to use with this, but I found Sobek with Acid Shells to work the best with this. And here is the Zarta's Whisper build for those who want to run a gun buffing setup in general or just want to use it for this. And here is my Sobek build that I am using at the moment. That pretty much covers everything with Garuda. She is strong. She can literally do damage cap with ease. The more health enemies have, the more she does, so she's infinite scaling, and she's just fun to play. And I think a lot of people overlook her, and I don't know why, but I do think you should give her a try, especially after the Jade Shadows update and all the new mods and arcanes that we have. She is very, very powerful. As always, a massive thank you to all of our amazing channel members. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for your support. I will see you guys in the next one.